Yeah, hi guys. Um, Brooks asked me to put together a bit of a video to answer some questions that hopefully might be of interest moving forward. It's Neil Thompson on the 30th of October 2020, and hopefully whoever you are watching this, you enjoy it, and I'll give you a bit of background as much as I can based on Brooks' question, so bear with me. The first question she's asked are in relation to my grandparents. My grandparents on my mother's side were lived in Forbes in New South Wales, and her name was Nellie, and to me she was Nana, and I never had anything to do with my grandfather on mum's side. He was an alcoholic tailor tailor is an occupation that makes clothing, and as was the case at the time, he was an aggressive, violent drunk, and my nana left him and took my mum and her sister, Auntie Marge, and came down to Melbourne to live. So that was pretty much all we know about him, that he was not an overly pleasant fella, but Nana was lovely. She was a terrific lady, lived in Strathallan over in Heidelberg for most of the time that I knew her. Grandparents on Dad's side, they were grocers. My grandfather, Jack Thompson, was a grocer. They lived in Hampton and ran the grocery store, which was like a mini supermarket back in the day, before supermarkets were grocery stores, and they used to travel into town and collect all the produce and set it up in their shop and sell it. And Grandma and Grandpa were decent people, and from what I can recall of them, they lived a fairly quiet life, but they were reasonably well-to-do. Took a couple of world cruises when it was something that only rich people did. So they had a few dollars when they sold their grocery store, which was prior to the introduction of supermarkets. They made a lot of money on that, and consequently had a couple of really nice holidays, but it didn't have a lot to do with them. But I think they were decent people who unfortunately didn't particularly spend a lot of time with us as we were growing up. Any famous or infamous relatives in the family? Not that I'm aware of, but nothing would surprise me. I was born on the 18th of August 1956, and I was born I'm pretty sure I was born in Ringwood at that time, which was before the Box Hill Hospital, and have two brothers. My elder brother John, who's 2 years older than me, and my younger brother Paul, who was 9 years younger. John lives down in Hastings in Victoria now. He's retired. And my other brother Paul married a doctor and lives in America, and he works in the doctor's business, in the medical business over in the States. They come over from time to time. They got a couple of kids, twins that they had, and we get to see them from time to time, which is great. I grew up at 32 Lucknow Street in Mitcham, which was just a typical little country, quiet town at the time. We lived opposite the Border Works, so we spent a lot of time playing around over there and in their lakes and dams and things, which of course you wouldn't be able to do nowadays. But it was a pretty good lifestyle, pretty relaxed and casual, and not a lot of stresses. My dad was the city valuer of Brunswick, so he worked long hours and was a very studious, highly intelligent guy who was meticulous in everything that he did. Very good drawer, somewhat introverted, and Mum was completely the opposite. My dad's name was Ronald John Thompson, and Mum was Gwenda Emily Thompson. Before she was married, she was Gwenda Emily Bowen. We lived in 32 Lucknow Street in Mitcham. I went to Vermont Primary School, and we used to walk to school. That was probably about 2 or 3, maybe 4 kilometres. And then I ultimately went to Vermont High School. Managed to get to Form 5, snuck through there, which is Year 11, and then went to work. First job was working in the as a machinery spare parts sales at Hassett's Machinery in Ringwood. They sold spare parts for rotary hose and tractors and what have you. That place is long gone now. It's all part of the Eastlink Freeway, and it was opposite the Coach and Horses Hotel in Ringwood. If that's still there, it's still there at the moment. I'm just trying to read what else we've got here. My first memory, oh gee, that's probably getting up this morning. It's about as far back as I can go. What were you good at school? I was very good at athletics, and I could run very fast for some unknown reason. It was just a God-given thing. So I did well in school sports. I didn't play a lot of football just because I was pretty lazy, wouldn't go to training. But when we did have games, I was a reasonable footballer, but mainly athletics. And I ran at Olympic Park in the state finals, and came, I think, 3rd or 4th there. So for a bloke who never trained, I had a bit of God-given skill, but no commitment, unfortunately. We always had our holidays. We had 2 weeks every year down at Dramana. We rented a house at Dramana, and the main reason for doing that was it was nice and close to home. We lived, as I said, in Mitcham, and we had our holidays at Dramana. And one of the main reasons for that was I had bad eczema as a kid, and the salt water was very good. So for the eczema, so they used to take us down there, and by the time I got back after a couple of weeks at the beach, usually I was in pretty good condition skin wise. So, and it was a nice part of the world to have holidays. I spent a lot of my early career after I left the machinery place working in the public service in the law department. Worked as a bench clerk sitting in front of the magistrate at Ringwood Magistrates Court initially, and then in the sheriff's office where we were involved in impanelling juries, and I worked in the Supreme Court for a number of years, and then later in the Corporate Affairs Office for many, many years. Married very young, and married just after I turned 19 to Lynette Willsmore, and that marriage didn't last long, unfortunately, and the positive out of that was 2 kids. Leonie, our first, was born in the January after we got married, and then 18 months later, Brooke came along. And unfortunately, a few years after that, the marriage ended, and I ended up with custody of the girls for about 18 months, and then ultimately the girls went to live with their mother, and that's a whole long story how that all sort of unfolded. So I remarried several years later, married Annette Campbell, and we had 4 more kids, so I've got a total of 6, 3 boys and 3 girls, and Leonie and Brooke live up in Queensland, and the next 4 were Philip, my eldest son, and he's married with 2 kids now, and then was Adam Christopher, and he lives in Baronia. He's an IT guy. Then Matthew Reese. Matthew is a guy who works in collectible coins and banknotes and what have you. So he's living with his girlfriend in an apartment in Richmond. And then Jenna. Jenna is just moved into her own house. She's 25, and her fiance Matt have just moved into bought a house up in Baronia as well. So they're going really well. And apart from COVID, they would have been married this year, but they're looking at getting married in April 2021. So that'll be a great time for the family. Hopefully everyone gets together then, and COVID will be past us. If I could have had any profession, what would it have been? Look, I've spent most of my career after I left the public service in human resources and working with people, and I think I've been blessed. It's been a great career. I've been successful, and I've worked for multiple employers. I tend not to stay in one job very long. I go in and work with employers who have a problem, and when the problem is resolved, I'll hand it over to somebody else. So I tend to be bought in when businesses are really in trouble. So I'm 64 now, and life is pretty good. I'm working at the moment with an organisation that brings workers in from the Pacific Islands to work in the rural areas of Victoria and around the rest of Australia, and that's a bit of a challenge, and particularly at the time of the pandemic that we're going through at the moment. But it's interesting, keeps me busy, and that's what I like to do. Who in your family is a standout? And what do we recall? I don't know that anyone is a particular standout. Mum was a stay-at-home mum and heavily committed to working in op shops and with the local community. So that was my memory of her. She was always there for us, which was important to her and Dad. And I guess I've adopted the same philosophy in my life, that Annette's been a stay-at-home mum and has looked after our kids, which has been fantastic for us. But I don't know that there's any individual that has done anything of extraordinary note. We've just, I think, decent people who try to do the right thing, and most of the time I think it's gone pretty well. So no one in the family that you should be ashamed of. What was your favourite thing to do when I was young, and what is it now? Favourite thing to do when I was younger was probably have a few drinks when I was old enough to do that with my friends and socialising. I enjoyed a number of other activities. I was in the Scouts as a kid, and that was always fun. So camping was good fun. When I turned 50, I discovered bushwalking and hiking, and in the last 15 years I've done hikes and walks all around the world, including I started with the Kokoda track in New Guinea, which was a fantastic experience, and I got very fit for that. And if you get the chance to study up on the Kokoda track, it's an amazing story. And subsequently done walks all around Australia and New Zealand and the rest of the world. Done the Camino across Spain, which is some 820 kilometre walk across Spain, and also the coast to coast walk across England. So that's been great fun. But otherwise, 3 or 4 years ago, I think we bought a holiday house in Bonnie Doon. Loved getting up there when we're not in lockdown, and that's a great little place that we've got up on the lake, assuming the lake is up, which sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. It's an irrigation lake up in Lake Eildon, and our place at Bonnie Doon sits right on the lake, so it's a great place to go fishing or boating or what have you. I love getting up there. It's a traditional old sort of Australian town, and thoroughly enjoy the people and just the whole environment up there. What did I get pocket money as a kid? Yeah, I think I did. It was I can't remember. It would have been maybe 20 cents. I don't recall, but I do remember saving up for the first thing that I ever saved up for was an electric blanket, which used to heat the bed, and I was very young at that stage, but I remember having to save up, and I think we got 1 shilling or 10 cents a week. That took me a couple of years to save up to get an electric blanket, which was a big deal. Sports, I've already gone over the sports. I'm a keen AFL follower now. I'm involved in, I sponsor various football clubs, the community football clubs of Upper Ferntree Gully, where I was the president, where Phil played, and the other 2 boys had a few games there as well, but I ended up there as president. And then stayed involved for a number of years working on the committee and fundraising and what have you, because I think community activity is great and should be encouraged. So I've been involved with the Upper Ferntree Gully Footy Club, and more recently with the Bonnie Doon Footy Club. I'm a sponsor there, and love getting up and watching the game. The guys have mixed success, but it's just a great community and social activity, and I love being involved in it. What was popular when you were a kid? Gee whiz, I remember platform shoes. You have to Google those. They were shoes that might have had a 3 or 4 inch sole on them, and flared pants. They were all the rage. Very wide ties and things called body shirts, which I don't think I'd go too well in at the moment. But the music was... at the time when I was young, it was the Beatles, and then the Rolling Stones were very big. So rock and roll was just starting. There was certainly no headbanging and heavy metal and that kind of stuff. It was what we refer to as probably proper music that you could sing along with. And then in latter years, it became sort of the Creedence Clearwater Revival and Little River Band and that sort of Australian bands. I was always keen to see those wherever I could. So that was the sort of music that we liked. What pets did I have as a kid? I grew up with dogs. Pretty much always had a dog as a kid, but it was more of a Kelpie, bit of a mongrel, and they were always black and they were always called Sooty, so it wasn't hard to remember. But our dogs were always great dogs, great companions, and just wherever we were, the dog would usually be not far behind. I do remember Guy Fawkes Night as a kid. They would build a big bonfire in a park or across the road in the Border Works, which was a huge, great pile of firewood, and you would then get crackers, which are illegal now. Like anything that's fun is considered dangerous and inappropriate. So we'd go and throw crackers into the bonfire and celebrate Guy Fawkes and Cracker Night, which was always a lot of fun. And the local kids would all come out, and we'd have a really good fun night. What am I good at? I think I'm pretty good at resolving issues that most people find hard to deal with. So I'm good in a crisis. I'm not good when I'm bored. I start looking for trouble. So as long as there's something to do and a challenge, I go all right. I'm not particularly good with my hands. I'm not a tradie, but I go okay with my mind and working problems out. particularly when it's management by crisis time, when something's really going wrong. I can work my way through processes where many other people seem to struggle with that. So for whatever reason, I keep getting dragged back into HR or human resource type issues, and I've made a career out of it, and it seems to go okay. So I think that's probably one of the things that you'd say is a strength. World events that stand out, apart from this pandemic, which has stood out for all the wrong reasons, and it's been incredibly difficult for people who live in Victoria to find themselves locked into their homes and unable to socialise, unable to do a lot of the things that we've taken for granted. It's been a very, very difficult time. So I think, as history will prove, that the world pandemic of COVID-19 in 2020 was just a unprecedented disaster. Australia avoided most of it, but unfortunately Victoria had a political situation where everything was done wrong, and as a consequence Victorians suffered to a degree that I think the people in the rest of Australia have little understanding of what it's been like for the last 6 months in Victoria. But we do seem to be coming out the other end now, and we're really hopeful. Today is the first day that we look like getting back to Bonnie Doon, which I'm really pleased about, and even though it's only for 2 days, we'll take whatever we can get. So we'll have to mow the lawn and get rid of the critters that have taken over the house, but we're looking forward to that. Beyond that, the things that have stood out in world history have probably been disasters. The World Trade Center in America, when that was attacked by terrorists and flew planes into it, I remember standing there watching that, thinking I'll never see anything as bad as that again. The other things that sort of stand out were when Princess Diana was killed in a car accident in France. That was horrendous, and that was world news, and people were just absolutely stunned that such a lovely person could be taken away in such a cruel manner. So that was pretty bad. And the other thing that sort of stopped Australia was, on a sporting basis, was, gee whiz, it was probably 30, 40 years ago when Australia won the America's Cup, which was a big deal at the time. It was a yachting race that no other country but America had ever won. So to beat the Americans is always a great joy at anything. They tend to be pretty pumped up about their own self-importance. So if we can actually beat them at something, it was bloody wonderful, and that was a big deal in Australian history. What do I think is the key to a happy life? Gee, if I knew that, I'd be making a fortune. I think when I came back from Kokoda, I wrote myself a mantra that I've tried to live by, and it comes up on my phone on a regular basis. And it's quite simple. It just says, leave a trail you can be proud of. So when you're doing things, just give a little thought at the time that you're doing them to when you look back on this in a year or a couple of years' time, will you be proud of the decision that you made, and are you trying to do the right thing? You can't please everyone, and you shouldn't try, because it won't work. But if you believe that you're doing the right things, be flexible, be a decent community-minded person to look after others who are less fortunate. Many people who you meet will have significant issues that they're dealing with that you're not necessarily aware of. Just try not to judge, try to be tolerant. And all of these things are wonderful throwaway expressions that are hard to do at the time. But if you can try to keep those things in mind, that everyone's carrying their own load, and if you can give them a bit of a hand along the way, well, that's a pretty good thing. What else have we got here? What accomplishments am I most proud of, apart from being able to say the word accomplishments? What am I most proud of? Gee, I think just the fact that I've got 6 kids who've all turned out to be quite unique and yet decent people in their own rights is a very fortuitous thing. I don't know if pride is the right thing. It gives me a lot of pleasure, but taking pride in things that you have really not had a lot of control over is not something that I try to do. I guess I'm proud of the fact that I've managed to provide for my family and look after and stay alive to 64, which I never thought I was going to do. I kind of figured I'd be dead before 30 the way I was conducting my life in the early days. So it's a surprise, maybe more than pride. I don't know that pride is something that I'm wildly linked to. It's not something that I walk around being proud of things. I'm going through a process at the moment of learning to fly gliders, which are like aeroplanes without a motor, and I find that incredibly challenging and confronting. So I guess I get some level of pride in the fact that if I can take off in a glider and fly around for an hour or so and then land without crashing, that's kind of cool. So I'm hoping to become a solo pilot before too much longer. And at my age, I think when you can do something that's as challenging as that, it's a bit of a thrill. What do I want people to remember about me? To be honest, I don't really care. I would like them to remember me for the sake of remembering me. I guess that I was either really bad or really good. I don't particularly mind. I like the thought that I'll be remembered, and I don't like the thought that people are saying, Neil Thompson, no, I can't place him. I'd like him to say, yeah, he was a bastard, or he was a great bloke, or he did some really good things, or he helped. I don't really mind, but the thought of not living your life to its potential, and people therefore just seem to waste a lot of their years and just seem to be filling in time waiting to die. So I'm kind of keen on not doing that. I like to achieve and move forward and take on new challenges. But I don't do it with the thought in mind that other people are going to think that what I'm doing is a good thing. It's of no interest to me. So look, I think I'm a decent person. I think I've made some mistakes in my life. I do try to make the right decisions, and I think largely I have left a trail that I'm proud of, and I think that's the best I can hope for. So I hope your life is good and fulfilling. I hope your health is good. Poor health will destroy your aspirations faster than anything else. So look after yourself, and when you get an opportunity to make a decision about what you're going to do on a particular instance, just try to bear in mind that people have suffered, and back in the early days in Australian history, many people suffered significant hardships so that you can be in a situation to make those decisions. So don't waste it. You don't have to get everything right, but just understand that people paid a price so that you can have the privilege of making the decision and living in the best country in the world. So that's about the message I'd like to finish off on. And I wish you all the well and have a pleasant life. Cheers, guys.